My name is David Patrick Columbia. Where was I born? I was born here in New York City. Actually, I just came down the street on which my family lived when I was born, which was on East 25th Street. They lived in a tenement building. My father was a chauffeur. My mother, I don't think worked, but I think she was the super of the building that they lived in so they could pay the rent. They lived there until I think they lived there long before I was born. They lived there for about 10 years before I was born. And then in the first year of my life, they moved to Massachusetts. I'm not quite sure how it shaped me, but all of that really resonates with me every single time I go down East 25th Street and past the building in which they lived when I was born. I came back to New York when I was 21 or 22 years old. I'd flunked out of college in my junior year, and I came directly to New York. I had won a playwriting contest in college, and the first prize was $100. And in 1962, you could come to New York with $100 and start your life. Well, when I was a child, I always wanted to live in New York, and I always wanted to live in Hollywood. My father was a New Yorker, and he got the tabloids every day when I was growing up in Massachusetts. And the tabloids then were the New York Daily News and the New York Daily Mirror. And they were full of columns like Walter Winchell. I started reading Walter Winchell when I was 6 years old. And so I always had a dream of living in the city. I was fascinated with Hollywood because I was fascinated with movie stars and movies and things like that. I was always fascinated with show business. I actually, at a very early age, when I was in my 20s, made an attempt to do that. But I actually was, when I stopped playing with toys, which was about 11 or 12, I started to write down the things that were going on in my mind when I played with toys. So I really started becoming a writer then. I did not imagine myself as being a writer when I grew up because I was always aware of the fact that I didn't know very much. And I always felt that writers, at least those that I read, were extremely knowledgeable and sophisticated. Well, I became, when I was in my late 30s, I had a business and it was starting to become very successful. And I always wrote. I always kept journals from the time I was in my 20s with the intention of teaching myself to write honestly. But I also had a business too. I had done several things, and at this particular time when I was in my 30s, I had a business, and it was becoming very successful. And I would spend more and more of my time writing my journals with this very successful business. And I realized that if I made a lot of money, which I was on the brink of doing, I would probably never be a writer. So I sold my business and I moved to California with the intention of becoming a writer. And for quite a long time, for about 7 or 8 years after that, I really did struggle and really didn't succeed at all and barely made any income whatsoever. And then I wrote a book for a movie star named Debbie Reynolds. I wrote her autobiography, which actually got me notice in the publishing world. And I was brought to New York to write a book for somebody else. And I had a feeling, because I knew the man and I had seen the first book that he did, he was an entertainer, I had a feeling that it might not work out between me and him, even though I liked him socially. I told myself I had to drive here. I took the job because I was broke and I simply needed money, and this was the only thing in front of me. So I decided that I was very depressed about the whole prospect because I thought if it didn't work out, I wouldn't have the money to go back to Los Angeles, and I liked living in Los Angeles. So I said to myself, just to make myself feel better, if you're going to be stuck in New York and you want to earn a living as a writer, if you could earn a living as a writer any way you wanted, what would you like to do? And the thought that came into my head was I would like to write a social column. And I was always aware of social columns from the time I was very young, from those tabloids that my father used to get every day. And I was always fascinated by it. And I didn't know how I could make that happen because I'm not really a networker. I don't have a networking personality, even though I'm very outgoing. And but serendipitously, it came to pass. I met somebody who had a magazine, and we had somebody mutual in common, and she asked me if I'd write an article about this person, and I did, and that started my career. And then a year later, she asked me if I wanted to write a column, and that's how it happened.